Hello everyone and welcome to another casual review. Today I'm talking about Dragon Quest II Luminaries of the Legendary Line. As the title would suggest, this game takes place 100 years after the events of the first Dragon Quest, and the main protagonist in the first one and his princess that he rescued basically had a bunch of babies, and then those babies had up more babies, and now they have a bunch of descendants. So the three protagonists in this game are descendants of that protagonist in the first game, who is a distant protagonist of the legendary hero named Erdrick. As far as protagonists go, the main one that you start playing as at the beginning of this game, I don't like the appearance of very much. He's basically wearing some pilot gear, some blue pilot gear. He doesn't really look like a knight, you know? It's not adventuring gear. He looks like he's about ready to go flying a plane or something because of his pilot goggles that he has on his helmet, and his helmet's weird. It's just like this round bulb. Anyway, I don't like the armor of the main protagonist. I liked the appearance of the main protagonist in the first game a lot better, and that's kind of a common theme in this game, actually. I think I enjoyed my time playing Dragon Quest I over Dragon Quest II. That doesn't mean that there aren't some benefits of this game over the first one, however. So in this one, the big bad is a evil wizard named Ergon, and he is typical. I mean, there's not too much like plot here, you know? You just basically are given the information, hey, evil wizard named Ergon, we gotta go take him down because he's going to conquer the world or whatever. In order to take on Ergon, though, you need to travel across the world and find 5 of these sigils and do a bunch of other stuff, and it's a bunch of it's almost like a wild goose chase here, because you have to go find all these items and do all these things, and it's just a mess almost. It's almost like a scavenger hunt, but unless you do a lot of digging and talk to like every NPC in the game, you're going on a wild goose chase. And so that's why this game I definitely recommend following a guide, because there is a lot of stuff that you have to explore and discover on your own. The game is significantly larger in scope than the first one, and maybe that's one of the reasons that I like the first one more than this one. It felt like it was more of a narrow, straight path in the first one without a lot of exploration. And the exploration in a normal game wouldn't be that big of a deal, but in this game there are so many wild encounters, and I don't know if it was more than the first one, but it's definitely more noticeable to me when I was playing this game, where like every 2 steps that you take out in this overworld, you're going to encounter some amount of enemies, and it just got tedious and annoying when I'm, 15, 16, 17 hours into this game, and I'm just trying to explore and get to the next place, and I'm just constantly getting bombarded with these random encounters. That being said, on top of all of these random encounters, I still needed to grind up to get up to the proper level in order to take on some of these challenges in the game, and so it's just felt so time wasting is the only expression I can think of. It just wasted my time grinding and fighting all these enemies and all these random encounters. It was tedious. There are some good things about this game. One of the things that I do like is you actually do play as 3 different characters. So you play as the main protagonist that you name, and then a prince and a princess, and all 3 of you are direct descendants from Erdrick. As far as the main protagonist, the pilot-looking dude, he's more of just like your straight-up fighter. He's all about using your basic attack to do damage. The second character, the prince that you find, he's like an all-round character. He has access to a decent amount of spells, but he can also do a decent amount of damage. And then the princess that you unlock, the third character, she's all about using spells, and she gets access to some pretty powerful spells later in the game. Now, the spells themselves are more varied in this game. Zoom is a lot better because you can choose which city you want to basically teleport to. There's a bunch of different spells. The thing about this game, now it wasn't noticeable in the first game because you would only encounter 1 enemy at a time. In this game, you can encounter upwards of like 6 or 7 different enemies at a time, and so that's when you really want to utilize the spells, because spells can hit multiple enemies. However, it can only target enemies that are the exact same. So if you are fighting against 6 different enemies and they're in groups of 2, you could only use a spell on one of those groups of 2 if they're the same. Now, that's not for every spell. You get a spell later in the game, like one spell later in the game that can just hit every enemy. And I just wish that every spell that you got from the very beginning also did that, because that's just another thing that made the combat so tedious, is you have to target these groups of similar enemies with your spells rather than just knocking them all out at once. I do like the names of the spells, especially in this game. There's obviously, like, you have Sizz and Fizzle and Kaboom and Kapow, and it's just funny. Like, obviously you would not really know what those spells do unless you looked at the description, but I enjoyed the silliness of the spells names in the first game and this game compared to something like Final Fantasy. It's more whimsical, and it kind of matches the whole tone of the game because all the characters are still cartoony images, just like in the first one. However, some of them actually do look dangerous in this one and a little more scary than the first Dragon Quest as well, but they still all have this cartoony aesthetic to them. Now, along with those changes to combat, there are also some more status effects in this game compared to the first one, namely poison. So you do get a spell that takes away the poison, but in this game, enemies can poison you with poison breath. So then there's also like various other effects that I can't quite remember if are in the first game, but it seems like that's more of a thing in this one, especially gaining access to boost up your defenses and lower the enemy's defenses. So you do have to put in more thought in this game with the combat than the first game. That's another reason why I like the first Dragon Quest over this one, is because there might have been a lot of random encounters and combat, but I could just mash A and get through it really quick because there's only one character that I'm controlling and I'm only facing one enemy at a time. So it's a lot easier and quicker to get through those combat sequences compared to this game when I have to put more thought into it and I have to decide which group of enemies I want to target my spell, and I have to micromanage 3 characters instead of just 1. And so maybe that's a reason why this game felt even more tedious than the first one. One thing that I don't get about this game that was in the first game is that items in the first game would stack. So if I have 5 healing herbs, they don't take up 5 slots in my item pouch. It just says healing herbs times 5. But in this game, each of those 5 healing herbs would take up 1 item slot. Now, that is still not too much of a big deal because all 3 of my characters have their own item pouches, but that brings up another issue where I need to micromanage gear between these 3 different characters, and it's just tedious having to trade items amongst my party members instead of one item pouch that is pooled for all of them to use. They each have their own. So if I want to use a item, I have to go through all 3 of my characters' item pouches to find that specific item rather than one shared one. On the topic of items, magic keys are a lot better in this game than the first one. Namely, they don't disappear when you use them. So if you get the silver key, then you can use it to unlock every single silver door that you come across and it won't disappear, along with the gold key, which is really nice not having to stock up on keys all the time, especially because in the first one, doors would relock as you left the area. Like I said, the world is a lot larger in scope in this game as well, so you do get access to a boat finally, so you can travel around, and you can also zoom, like I said, to all the different cities. So you're going to be exploring all over this world and following the guide. I'm just following the guide and just like wondering to myself, how would I even know to go here? Or how would I even know to use this item at this location? And I suspect somewhere in some random city in the corner of this world, one NPC says like, hey, wouldn't it be nice to use the false idol in this one citadel? And then I guess back in the day, you had to write that stuff down in a notebook and just reference it whenever you explore a new area. I could just see this game taking forever before the internet because you didn't have access to this information. And so it's just so random, and there's so many different items that do so many different things with hardly any inclination on when to use them. It's tedious and it's a lot. Now, one thing that I do like about this game is its ties to the first Dragon Quest. For instance, you go to old landmarks from the first Dragon Quest and recognizable landmarks from the first one, and you even go to the Dragon Lord's descendant. The Dragon Lord was the main antagonist in the first Dragon Quest, and in this one he's just like your homie and gives you some advice, which I think is really funny because like he hates Ergon the evil wizard as well, of course. Another thing that I think is funny is whenever one of your party members passes away, there's not really a early or mid-game spell to revive them, and so you basically just have a casket following you around until you can contact a priest, which will revive your party members. So it's just funny with these caskets that are just following you around in the overworld instead of your party members. Like, why didn't they just not have a sprite for any of your characters that have passed away? If you have seen my first Dragon Quest casual review, you'll know I wasn't too big on that game. I gave it a 2 out of 5, but at least it only took me like 6 or 7 hours to do that one. Encounters were quick and snappy. It was straightforward and to the point, and it wasn't it didn't overstay its welcome. This game did overstay its welcome. While objectively it does a lot of stuff better than it did the first one, like you have your party members and more spells and all this exploration that you can do, it ends up overstaying its welcome quite a lot. It was about 3 times the length even if I was following a guide, and I never had to really grind in the first Dragon Quest, but I definitely had to in this one in order to take on that final boss, because he is a step above Dragon Lord from the first Dragon Quest, I can tell you that. I was just so glad to finally be done playing this game. If I was to either replay Dragon Quest 1 or Dragon Quest 2, I would definitely replay Dragon Quest 1, because this game just, I'm done with it, you know? And I think I need a break from Dragon Quest. I understand like newer Dragon Quest games have improved on the formula a lot, but as far as like these older Dragon Quest games, I think I'm going to take a significant break from it because it just wasn't fun for me. I'm going to give Dragon Quest 2 a 2 out of 5 as well. I would not consider this game bad, but I just got bored and frustrated with it eventually, in a way that I never really felt with like the older Final Fantasy games. So at this point, I'm still a Final Fantasy fan over Dragon Quest. Now, maybe when I play newer versions and iterations of Dragon Quest, I'll change my mind. But as of right now, that's my stance. I'm still a Final Fantasy guy over Dragon Quest. Well, guys, that's it for me. Let me know if you have any questions or comments about Dragon Quest II Luminaries of the Legendary line, and I'd love to hear what you have to say. Otherwise, I'll talk to you later. Bye!